Thank you, Howard, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a wonderful pleasure to be with you today, and I extend a warm welcome and my special thanks to all of you for joining all of us for this 35th Annual Conference on U.S. and Turkey Relationships. I appreciate, and I'm sure you do as well, how unique this opportunity is not only to enjoy each other's company, but also to celebrate the enduring qualities and the surpassing importance of this bilateral relationship. I know that many of you are committing a significant amount of time and personal resources to be here this week, and I thank you deeply for that. I'm fully confident that your participation will be richly rewarded, just as it has been for the thousands of Turks and Americans before you in the more than 3-decade history of this conference. The primary purpose of the conference each year, in my view, is to highlight for the international community the fact that the U.S. and Turkey are friends, our allies, and our partners, and we share mutual interests in the growth and stability of one another, as well as around the globe. Each year, well ahead of the conference itself, we agree on a conference theme that's intended to underscore the major themes and trends in the bilateral relationship during the past year. And so this year, perhaps unsurprisingly, we chose the theme, Shaping the Future, Business, Innovation, and Growth. The conference planners from both the ATC and TAIC coalesced around this theme almost immediately, and the partnership in developing the theme has been fantastic. So this year's gathering convenes CEOs, entrepreneurs, senior military from both countries, investors, senior members of the United States Congress and the Turkish Parliament, and ministers and cabinet secretaries to debate, to discuss, and collaborate on both macro level and sector-specific topics that are crucial to both countries. Economically, we must count both our countries among the most fortunate on the planet. For while our respective growths over the past year was not all that we would have wished, it was in both cases positive and far better than that sustained by many other countries, including most of our European partners. Turkey and America form an essential relationship, in my view, because of where we are, because of what we stand for, the economic welfare, the national security, the individual freedoms and democratic rights of one has a critical bearing on the other. We are commercial partners thanks to the thousands of joint ventures that create jobs and improve the living conditions of millions of Americans and Turks around the world. We're also national security allies, primarily thanks to NATO, partners in the Middle East thanks to our mutual interests in combating terrorism and promoting democracy. Over the course of the coming 2 days, we will focus your attention on the opportunities that emerge from this special relationship and underline the important developments in the bilateral relationship that have occurred since this conference last convened last year. Turkey and the European Union are bearing an increasingly heavy burden for the pain and suffering that Bashar al-Assad is inflicting on his own people. During the past 5 years, as that country's civil war has raged, it has cost 500,000 lives and resulted in a large-scale humanitarian crisis that includes millions of refugees and displaced persons, and no one knows it better than our friends in Turkey. And lately, we've seen an uptick in the cross-border bombings and bloodshed. So it has to be said, I think, that the international community's efforts to either resolve or ameliorate the consequences of this conflict have been lacking to date, and that our bilateral coordination efforts have also been far from perfect. So it is obvious at this point that we should continue to strive harder and work in even closer cooperation. I can think of no outcome in Syria that would be acceptable to one and opposed by the other. This past summer, Turkey's legitimately elected government survived an attack on its democracy, an event that was recognized immediately by the United States on July 15th, even as events on the ground were unfolding. Today, many months later, the United States continues to stand by our partners and friends and allies and support Turkey's effort to recover and strengthen its institutions. As a result of the July 15th attack, Turkey and the United States have enjoyed a reinvigorated dialogue, and I'm very, very happy to see that, as I'm sure you are, as evidenced by the recent visit to Turkey of the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Vice President, and the Secretary of Defense. And we are also pleased that you will hear from both the J5 of the Turkish General Staff and the J5 of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff who will join us at this conference. So I think it is our collective mission here today to ensure that this dialogue continues to expand over the course of the coming year. Later this morning, a distinguished panel will discuss the upcoming U.S. election and the future outlook of U.S. foreign policy. The remainder of the day will feature a wide-ranging mix of panels focused on manufacturing, defense procurement and security cooperation, telemedicine, construction, tourism, and trends in trade and investment. We're also very happy that Turkey's Deputy Prime Minister Şimşek will be joining us today as well. That's a very special treat, and we're honored that the Deputy Prime Minister would go to the trouble of making the long trip. This evening, for the first time, we will host a networking reception instead of a formal dinner in order to create a more interactive and social environment for this year's participants. It is, after all, in Washington, Halloween, both in our society and our politics. Then there will be a series of panel discussions focused on NATO, on renewable energy, cybersecurity, banking and finance. And the afternoon will feature 2 workshops, one on export compliance and offset legislation, the other on state-level economic development and market entry. So we hope you'll find these programming change from previous years both informative and engaging. And finally, in the evening, there will be a cultural reception followed by the gala dinner to close out the conference. So you can see that we have a very packed agenda, and I'm confident that at every session you will hear the best and the freshest thoughts and find a tight focus on a relationship that I'm firmly convinced is among the most important in the world, and that is our U.S.-Turkey bilateral relationship. And I'm delighted that you've chosen to be with us for the full experience. And so once again, on behalf of the Board of Directors of ATC and our corporate members, welcome. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce the Chairman of TAİK, our partners for this conference, Ms. Chairman Ekim Alptekin. Thank you.